The wind cut low across the plains like a blade skimming over the frozen ground and lifting bits of brittle grass into the air. Snow had come early, a dry, hard dusting that settled like ash, and the soil beneath it had cracked from thirst. A crow called once from the fence post, then fell quiet watching. She stood in the yard barefoot, her feet red and raw, though she did not seem to notice. The hem of her dress was stiff with mud, and one sleeve had come unstitched at the shoulder, hanging limp. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the black dot shrinking into the silver distance. A horse, a man, riding away. The door behind her creaked open, and the smallest of the children came out, no older than 4 arms wrapped in a too large shawl. He didn't speak, just leaned against her leg and looked where she looked, not understanding the leaving, only that it meant hunger, cold, and waiting. Inside the cabin was near empty. Just enough cornmeal to last a day, a heel of bread gone dry, and a sack of beans she had counted twice this morning, willing it to grow heavier. The stove had no wood. She'd burned the broom the night before, and what little was left of the rocking chair. 7 children, no man, no food, no wood, and now the snow. She didn't cry. Her throat was too dry for that, and the tears had long since given up. Her knees buckled instead. Her body folded down into the snow, the boy still clinging to her side. She pressed her face to the frozen ground, lips moving in silence. It was the silence that hurt most, the stillness after the hoofbeats faded, the way the air did not care, the way no hand reached for her. Just the crows, just the wind, just the empty cold. Later she moved. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Because the baby was screaming inside and the middle girl had started coughing again. Because if she stayed kneeling in the snow, she'd never stand up again. She built a fire with fence rails and the last of the straw mattress. Boiled water. Crushed the old bark from the birch tree behind the cabin and spooned it like medicine into the baby's mouth. She didn't know if it would help, but she knew not doing it would kill him. The oldest boy, 10, maybe chopped wood until his hands bled, but he did not cry. She watched him from the window, saw the way he paused between strikes like he was listening for something. For someone. At night, when they slept in a pile for warmth, she sat upright with her hands on her knees and stared at the door. She imagined it opening. His voice. Boots tracking snow across the floor. A rough laugh. A promise kept, but nothing came. Just the wind scratching at the eaves and the baby wheezing in his sleep. In the days that followed, she rationed the food so thin she herself ate nothing. Her skirts hung off her like a curtain now, and her fingers could no longer close into fists. But she kept the fire going. She patched the roof with hides sewed from scraps by lantern light. She pulled the girl's tooth when it festered. She carried water with a split bucket tied with rope. She did all this not because she believed he would come back, but because she had 7 small reasons not to die. She spoke to them at night in soft stories, old ones from her mother's mouth. She painted pictures with her voice of rivers and fields of fruit and warm bread, of rooms with windows that let in sun. They listened wide-eyed, hungry, not just for food, but for something to believe in. And she gave it to them. Outside, the plains stretched on like a great sleeping god, indifferent and vast. She had once loved this land, its brutal honesty, its room to breathe. But now she hated it for its silence, for swallowing the man who left them without even a word. The truth came in quiet flashes. Not that he had died. She would have known it, felt it. No, he had left. Had chosen something easier. Or someone. It made her stomach sick to think it, but it also steeled her. There would be no rescue, no return. Only her, only them, and whatever came next. Then one morning, with frost still on the panes and the baby coughing blood, there was a sound. Hoofbeats. Slow, hesitant. She rose without thinking, walked to the door, opened it with shaking hands. And there he was, dust on his coat, hat in his hands, eyes rimmed red. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave us." He didn't speak. She fell to her knees. He stood still, the reins slack in his fingers, the horse pawing at the dirt behind him. His mouth opened once, then closed. Snow clung to the brim of his hat, melting slow, darkening the fabric like sweat. Inside the cabin a cough rattled, the kind that came from deep down, a wet scraping sound. The sound of sickness turning. Her fingers curled into the porch floor. She wasn't crying, not really, just holding on to something, to anything. He stepped forward, one boot on the first stair, then the second. "You said you'd only be gone 3 days," she said, not looking at him. Her voice came like gravel across dry stone. "It's been nearly 3 weeks." "I know." "Did you forget where we live?" "No." Then why? Her voice cracked, but her body didn't move. "Why did you ride off with the last of the money, leave us with no food, no word?" He set his hat down slow on the railing, ran a hand through his hair like the weight of it all had just caught up. "I got scared," he said. "Didn't think I was man enough to fix it. Figured if I left, maybe someone else." "There is no one else." Her voice came quiet, but it cut sharp. "You left me with 7 children. A newborn sick. No one for miles. I boiled bark and burned the damn bed frame to keep them warm. And you were scared?" She finally looked up. He didn't flinch from her stare, but she saw it, the shame settling under his skin. He hadn't been beaten. He hadn't been robbed. He'd just run. "I went south to Dodge. Thought I could find work quick," he said. "But it wasn't quick. And I drank. I was weak. That's the truth." "You think that matters now?" she asked. "Think that brings food in the house, wood for the stove? What am I supposed to do with your shame?" He stepped closer, but she rose before he could reach her. Her knees shook, but she stood. "I begged you not to leave," she said. "I begged. And you looked me in the eye and rode off anyway." The silence stretched long. "I came back," he said finally. She laughed, once dry and bitter. "Did you expect a ribbon for that?" "No," he said. "But I ain't asking you to forgive me now. Just asking if you'll let me fix what I broke." She looked at him, really looked. The hollows under his eyes, the ragged clothes, the dirt caked behind his ears. He looked like a man who had been to hell and found nothing there worth staying for. Behind her, the baby coughed again. She didn't look back. She knew that sound by heart now. "You came back with empty hands," she said. "No," he said, and turned. From the saddlebag he pulled out a cloth sack, opened it. Beans, potatoes, cornmeal, a small wrapped cut of dried meat. Traded the horse's shoes for food. Took work at the depot stacking freight. Slept in the hayloft. Got this much. She stared at the sack. It wasn't much. Not nearly enough. But it was something. He stepped forward and offered it to her, 2 hands. "I ain't looking to be let off the hook," he said. "But I want to stand where I should have stood. If you'll let me." Her arms didn't move. Not yet. Her face gave nothing. Then, one by one, the children crept out behind her. Bare feet, quiet steps. Eyes wide. The oldest boy stood at her side, not touching, just standing. "You gonna run again?" the boy asked, his voice rough. The man swallowed. "No," he said. "Not ever again." The boy nodded once. Not forgiveness. Just something like permission. The woman reached out, took the sack from his hands. "Get inside," she said. "Fire's near out. Water needs hauling." He didn't smile, just nodded. Went to work. She stood for a long time on the porch, watching the horizon again. The wind still blew cold. The sky still pressed low. But someone had come back. and that for now would have to be enough. Ride through the quiet, subscribe and stay. The door shut behind him with a dull thud, and for a moment all was still. She stood outside a few breaths longer, her hands curled around the sack of food like it might vanish if she looked away. Then she stepped inside. The cabin smelled of smoke and sickness, damp wool, cold beans left too long in the pot. But it was home, and the children had begun to stir. The baby whimpered softly, the rasp in his chest lighter today than it had been. She took that as grace, though she'd stopped praying some time ago. He was already at the stove, stacking what was left of the rail slats into a tight bundle. His movements were quiet, like he was afraid of startling something, her maybe, or himself. He didn't look at her when she passed, just kept working, jaw set. She poured a measure of cornmeal into the pot, added water. No salt, no milk. But it was warm, and when she fed it to the children, they didn't ask questions. Just ate. Later, she handed him the bucket without a word. He took it, hauled water from the well, shoulders hunched as if he thought the ground might open beneath him. He came back wet to the elbows, panting from the cold. She let him catch his breath, then gave him the axe. For days they didn't speak of what had happened, not aloud. Words hovered unsaid between each shared task. He fixed the back window. She sewed the baby's blanket. He mucked the latrine. She mended the boy's coat. But something shifted, not quickly and not with ease. More like frost thawing on sunlit bark, slow, barely visible, but sure. One morning she found him outside before dawn, carving a wooden spoon with a pocket knife. The shape was rough but careful. She stood in the doorway, arms folded. "What's that for?" she asked. "Thought maybe the little one could use his own," he said. "He don't keep much down." She watched him a moment, then nodded once and went back inside. In the evenings he told the children stories. Not grand ones, just small, true things. About his brother getting bit by a badger. About falling through river ice as a boy. About their mother's biscuits so hard you could chip a tooth. The stories made the children laugh, and she'd watch from the table, sewing by lantern light, the thread trembling only slightly in her hand. One night after the children were asleep, he spoke low across the room. "I thought leaving would make it easier," he said. "Thought maybe I was the weight that was dragging us down." She didn't answer right away, just set down her needle and looked at him. "You were," she said plainly, "but it wasn't the leaving that broke us. It was the silence." He nodded, a long, slow nod. Then he said, "I ain't gonna be silent anymore." Winter pressed on, cruel as ever. Storms came and went, and once a coyote tried the hen house. But they held on. He made traps. She made broth. The children grew leaner but not sick. The baby's cough cleared. One afternoon he came back from the town with a book wrapped in paper. "What's that?" she asked, not suspicious, just tired. "Primer," he said. "For the older two. Schoolhouse might be open by spring. Figured they ought to be ready." She turned the book over in her hands. The corners were worn, but the pages were clean. "That cost you," she said. He shrugged. "Traded half a sack of oats and a morning's labor." She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. That night she sat beside him by the fire while the children slept, close, not touching, her shoulder a breath away from his. "You scared me," she said after a long silence. "I scared myself. If you ever do that again—" "I won't." She nodded, and that was all. The next morning he kissed the baby's forehead before heading out. The baby reached for his beard and laughed. She stood in the doorway and watched him go, his shape cutting through the morning fog. She didn't say it, but she thought it. You came back. And maybe next time she'd find the words. By the time spring crept over the plains, it did not come in bloom or glory, but in mud. thick and brown, sucking at boots and wagon wheels trailing up into the cabin on small feet that didn't know better. Still, it was welcome. The cold had broken, and with it came light. Pale, hesitant sun that slanted through the warped window panes, warming the dirt-packed floor and lighting the children's hair in gold. The baby had learned to sit up on his own, the girl's cough was gone, and the old hen who'd somehow survived winter's cruelty had begun laying again. He planted a row of potatoes behind the shed even though the ground was poor. Dug it with blistered hands, refused to stop when she told him to rest. She watched from the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, jaw tight. Not with anger, not anymore, just watching, just waiting to see if the roots would take. Inside, life had found a new rhythm. He rose early to work the land, returned tired and mud-soaked, sometimes with a bundle of kindling or a caught rabbit. She cooked, cleaned, taught the oldest how to sew a straight seam. They worked side by side without speaking too much, not because they were strangers, but because there was peace and quiet now, and understanding. Still, sometimes at night, she woke in a sweat, heart galloping. She'd reach for him just to see if he was still there. Not to touch, just to see. Sometimes he was awake too, staring at the ceiling, haunted in his own way. One evening, as he mended a broken chair leg by lantern light, he spoke without looking up. "My father left," he said, "when I was just about the boy's age." She didn't answer, just listened. Never said why, just gone. We waited a week before my mama stopped setting his place at the table. That was longer than we could afford. The flame flickered. The sound of the knife scraping wood filled the space between them. I always swore I'd never be him. Then one day I looked up and realized I was doing the same thing. He set the chair leg down. I hated him for leaving. Still do. But now I think I understand how a man can look at the ones he loves and feel so small he thinks they're better off without him. Her voice came quiet. "You were wrong. I know." She folded the laundry slow, smoothing the edges of the worn cotton shirt he wore most days. Her hands moved like habit, but her eyes didn't leave him. "You stayed now? That matters." He looked up then. The lines in his face seemed deeper in the soft light, but his eyes were steady. "I aim to keep staying." The door creaked open behind them. The oldest girl poked her head in hair and Tangle's cheeks pink from sleep. "Mama, the baby's crying." She stood, but he touched her arm. "I'll go." She hesitated, then let him pass. Watched as he disappeared into the small bedroom, his voice low and soft behind the door. She sat back down, stared at the chair leg he'd been mending. It wasn't perfectly done. The joint was still crooked, but it would hold. Later that week she found a tin ring in the apron drawer. Bent wire twisted into a loop hidden under a square of cloth. No note, no explanation, just there's there. She didn't ask about it. Not yet. But she didn't throw it away either. One afternoon, after a long morning of hauling water and washing clothes, she paused outside. The fields rolled out like old leather, cracked and full of promise. The wind was warm now. Smelled of thawing earth and creek mud. Somewhere far off a meadowlark called. He was out by the fence, teaching the boy to hammer a nail straight. She watched them a long while. The boy missed twice, then hit true. The man clapped him on the shoulder, proud but quiet. She smiled without meaning to. There was no guarantee, no promises written in stone, but they were still here. Still trying, and that counted for something, maybe everything. The rains came hard that spring, heavy sheets drumming on the roof day after day, until the creek near the eastern edge of their land swelled past its banks, and the roads turned to slurry. Inside, the air grew damp and close, the walls beating with sweat. Mice found their way in through the cracks. She set traps and taught the second boy how to empty them without flinching. He patched the roof and the worst of it, shirt soaked through, slipping on the shingles but not stopping. She'd watched him from below, her hands gripping the windowsill too tight, her mouth dry with things she didn't say. Come down. Don't fall. I need you. And he hadn't. He came down caked in mud and dripping but smiling in a quiet way she was starting to recognize, one that wasn't pride so much as peace. A man earning his place again day by day. One morning after 3 days of storm, the rain eased. The cabin steamed in the rising sun, and for a few short hours the ground held still. She went outside to check the garden, bent low to the soil, rubbing the leaf of a potato shoot between her fingers. It was small, but it was green, alive. She didn't hear him come up behind her. "It's coming up better than I thought," he said. She nodded, not standing. "Could be a decent harvest if the bugs don't get to it." "I'll put up traps," he said. "Ash and lime, maybe. That's what my mama used." She looked up at him then. He was squinting into the sun, brow furrowed like he hadn't expected it to shine so soon. "I remember her," she said quietly, "at your brother's wedding. She gave me a needle case with blue thread." He smiled, said you had strong hands. She liked that. She stood slowly, brushing the dirt from her palms. "I've had to keep them strong." He nodded. "You shouldn't have had to do it alone." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in many weeks, the ache in her chest softened. The anger wasn't gone, but it had become something else. Something with edges worn down by time and labor, and the simple hard act of showing up again and again. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, she sat beside him at the table. He was sharpening a blade. She reached into her apron and pulled out the tin ring, set it on the table between them. "I found this," she said. He looked at it a long time. "I didn't know if it was worth anything," he said finally. "Didn't have the money to buy something real, but I still wanted to ask." "Ask what?" He set the blade aside, leaned forward, forearms resting on the scarred wood. "If you'd have me, for real, not just as the man who came back, but as your husband." She studied his face, searching for a trace of false hope, of easy promises. There was none. Just a man worn down to the bone but willing. Wanting. She picked up the ring, turned it once in her fingers, then slid it onto her hand. It fit not perfectly, but well enough. "You'll need to ask the children too," she said. "I already did," he said. She smiled just a little. "And?" "They said only if I promise never to burn the biscuits again." She let out something close to a laugh. A real one. Short, surprised, but honest. "Well," she said, "you'd best start practicing." He reached for her hand, then across the table. She let him. They sat like that for a long time, saying nothing, while the fire crackled low and the walls held firm around them. Outside, the land exhaled steam into the cooling air. The creek still ran high, but it was no longer rising. In the distance, the first night frogs began to sing. It wasn't a perfect life. It would never be, but it was theirs, and it was beginning again. Summer rose slowly on the plains, first in hints, longer light, warmer air, a few stubborn wildflowers blooming along the fence line. The earth, soaked and softened from spring's rain, began to yield. The garden swelled with promise. Squash vines thickened. Beans climbed the old chicken wire. Even the apple tree behind the shed, half dead the year before, put out green shoots. The children ran barefoot now, their laughter bright and high in the long grass. The girl who had once coughed through the night was healthy and strong, her cheeks sun-browned hair tied back with twine. The baby toddled after the others, his balance wobbly but determined. He'd taken his first steps one morning before breakfast, stumbling toward her open arms. She'd caught him, pressed him tight to her chest, and looked up to find him, her husband, now watching from the doorframe, eyes glassed with something too deep to name. He was different in the summer light, straighter, fuller. The lines in his face were still there, but they weren't so heavy. He worked dawn to dark, sometimes longer, splitting wood, building a new chicken coop, even patching the barn roof, though it made his legs tremble. He'd taken to humming as he worked, low and aimless, and once she'd caught him teaching the second boy to whittle a slingshot. The boy's hands were clumsy but patient, just like his father's. She'd changed too. The hollows beneath her eyes had softened. Her hair, once tangled and brittle, was tied in a neat braid most days. Her hands were still cracked, still calloused, but steadier, stronger. She'd started singing again when she washed the clothes. Nothing fancy, just old hymns, half remembered and reassembled from memory. They talked more now when the children were asleep, not about the past that had become a quiet place between them, something understood but not picked at, but about what might come. "We could keep a cow," he said one night, watching the fire burn low. "Fresh milk, butter, maybe raise calves to trade." She nodded. "You think we can afford one if we put some money away? Sell half the squash. Maybe I can work the rail crew this fall." She looked at him, weighing the words. There was risk in it, but there was also something else, something they hadn't had in a long time. Possibility. "All right," she said. "We'll try." Later he built her a shelf for the cabin. 3 planks planned and smoothed by hand, with a carved edge that ran like wave. He hung it near the window. She filled it with jars, dried beans, rose hips, a feather the baby had found. And in the center, the needle case his mother had given her, now worn soft with years of use. She caught him watching her one morning as she tied her apron. She raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. He shook his head, smiled a little. "Just didn't think I'd ever see you like this again." "Like what?" "Steady. Whole." She turned away, tying the knot tight at her back. "I'm not whole, but I'm here." He stepped closer, laid a hand gently on her back. "That's enough for me." One afternoon word came by Ryder that a family downriver had taken sick. She packed a jar of broth and a tin of herbs, tied a bundle of rags, and asked the oldest to mind the little ones. She rode out before sunrise, returned just before dusk with blood on her hands and a fever behind her eyes. He didn't ask questions, just washed her arms, made her tea, and watched her sleep through the worst of it. When she woke, he was holding the baby on his lap, gently rocking, whispering something only the child could hear. She watched them for a while, half dreaming, and thought, "We are not what we were, and we may never be easy, but we are real. We are still standing." And that counted for something. One evening, as summer began to wane, they sat outside after the children had gone to sleep. The stars spilled wide above them, more than she could ever count. He took her hand. His was calloused warm. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "Building a second room. Give the children more space." She nodded. "We'll need to clear the brush behind the shed. I'll start next week." The wind stirred the tall grass. A coyote howled far off, not close enough to worry. She leaned against his shoulder, eyes half closed. "We're building something," she said. He kissed her temple. "Yes, we are." And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it might last. Autumn came with gold in its hands, bright and brittle, scattered across the fields like coins the wind had dropped. The garden gave its last offerings, crooked carrots, tough cabbage, squash too large to carry without straining. They stored what they could, dried what they couldn't, and gave the rest to neighbors who passed through on foot or by wagon. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and sweet apple peel, of old wool and soapstone. Inside, the air was warm. Lived in. Real. He started on the second room, as promised, cutting each board himself. The boys helped when they could, running for nails or holding the beam steady while he hammered. She watched from the window, sometimes her hands still, her breath catching on a quiet thought. This is what it should have been from the start. One night she joined him outside where he worked by lantern light. She carried a tin cup of coffee, handed it over without a word. He drank, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Almost got the frame done," he said. "Floorboards'll be next." She nodded, then stepped close enough for him to feel the weight of what she was carrying. "I never told you what it cost me," she said. He looked at her, quiet now. She went on. "When you left, I didn't sleep. Not really. I didn't eat, didn't breathe right. Every time a hawk circled, I thought it might mean one of the children was about to die. Every knock at the door, I thought it was someone come to bury us." She folded her arms tight, like holding herself was the only way to stay standing. "I wanted to hate you. Some days I still do. Not for going, but for making me strong when I didn't want to be." He set the cup down, reached for her, but she stepped back. "I'm not saying that to hurt you," she said. "I just need you to know what it cost." "I do," he said. "I think about it every day." She looked at him then, and in her eyes was that quiet, searing truth they both knew. Some wounds don't bleed, but they never close either. They just stay there, part of the body, tender and living. "But I'm here," she said. He nodded. "And I'm not leaving again." They stood like that in the lantern glow, nothing soft between them except the silence. The next morning she found a small package on the kitchen table, brown paper, tied with a bit of twine. No note. She opened it and stared. A pair of leather boots. New. The stitching was rough, the soles thin, but they were hers. The first new pair she'd had in years. He came in a moment later, wiping sawdust from his arms. "You can't keep walking barefoot through winter," he said simply. She touched the boots like they might vanish. "Where did you get the leather?" "Traded the mule cart for it. Built a new sledge. It'll pull easier in snow anyway." She said nothing, just carried the boots to the hearth and sat down, lacing them slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold. He watched her the whole time, then turned away. Not out of shame, just to give her the moment. Later, when the first frost hit and the wind turned sharp, she stood at the door of the finished second room and watched the children sleep side by side on a mattress of hay and old blanket. There was laughter in their sleep, a softness she hadn't heard in a long time. He stepped beside her. His shoulder brushed hers. "They sleep easier now," he said. "They know we're not going anywhere," she replied. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. That night they lay together under the quilt her mother had made. He brushed the hair from her forehead, kissed the scar near her temple she never spoke about, and for once there were no ghosts between them. Only breath, only warmth. Outside the wind howled across the plains, but the walls held strong, and the fire never went out. The first snow came early, brushing the porch steps in silence before sunrise, laying a pale sheen across the yard. When she opened the door that morning, the light caught on it like silver. She stood there barefoot for a moment, breath clouding, boots in her hand, remembering. The land was hushed. No birds, no wind, just the quiet fall of flakes and the slow stirring of something sacred, not peace exactly, she thought, but stillness earned. He was already outside, splitting wood near the shed. His coat, patched and heavy, shifted with each swing. The axe rose and fell in rhythm. Not frantic, not hurried, just steady, reliable. She watched for a long moment before stepping back inside. By the time the children woke, the snow was thick enough to track. They pressed their faces to the window, squealed, and begged to go out. She wrapped them in layers, rags and blankets, last year's coats, mended at the seams, and sent them out one by one. The baby stayed strapped to her hip, warm against her belly. She made bread that morning, real bread with flour he'd brought from town, and a bit of dried yeast she'd saved in a jar for just such a day. The cabin filled with the smell of it, earthy, rich, comforting. When he came in from the cold, cheeks red and beard frosted, he paused in the doorway like he didn't quite believe it. "You made that?" he asked. She arched an eyebrow. "No, it made itself." He smiled and came to warm his hands by the stove. The children piled in after him, tracking Snow, laughing, asking too many questions. She barked at them to wipe their feet, but her voice held no sharpness. When the bread came out, they ate with their hands, hot steam rising, butter melting down fingers. He caught her eye across the table. She didn't smile, not exactly, but something in her face softened. And that was enough. That night, after the children were put to bed, she found him sitting by the fire coat, still on, carving something in his lap. "What now?" she asked, settling beside him with a sigh. He held it up. A small horse, barely the length of her palm. Rough around the edges, but clearly made with care. "For the boy," he said. "He lost his last one in the creek." She turned it in her fingers. "You never used to make time for things like this?" "I didn't know how to stay still," he said. She looked at him for a long beat. "And now?" "Now I want to." She set the carved horse down and leaned back against the wall. The fire snapped and shifted, shadows dancing over the walls. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words were quiet, almost casual. His head turned fast. What? She didn't say it again, just looked at him steady. 1,000 things passed over his face, shock, fear, something close to joy, but what settled in the end was something deeper. "All right," he said. She waited for more, but he didn't say it in panic or apology. He said it like a vow. "I can't promise it'll be easy," she said. "I know. We don't have room. We'll make room." She folded her arms over her chest, one thumb resting against the curve of her belly. "I'm scared." He reached for her hand, took it. "So am I, but I'm not running." The baby cried, then a soft sound from the other room. She started to rise, but he stood before her. "I got him." She watched as he crossed the room, the firelight gold on his shoulders. She listened as he lifted the child, soothed him with a murmur she couldn't quite hear. And in that quiet moment she realized she believed him. He wasn't the man who left anymore. He was the man who stayed. Subscribe and let the journey keep unfolding.